G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day, and it's Wednesday hump day, at least here in Australia, and you're halfway through the week making it to the weekend. But today we have a fair bit to go over. We're going to look at some new weapons used, we're going to talk about fortifications, we're going to look at some very deep strikes into Russia from Ukraine and what was hit, what was targeted, and maybe what was actually missed. But we're going to talk about conscription first off the bat. But one thing which I do have to talk about is I actually missed something fairly crucial yesterday on one of the maps, being one of the Noel reports maps from yesterday. Somehow, just in my infinite bloody wisdom, I missed this whole part up here, talking about this is just out from the west of Avdiivka in Semenivka, where there is, from a Ukrainian source, saying there is a crossing of the Derna River here, and that is important. So I do apologize that I missed that. I pinned it in the top comment, but still not good enough. I will clear that up once we get into the mapping portion of this video, probably in about my second half-ish. But yesterday, what we did speak about was we did talk that Zelensky had sacked one of the commissioners for the defenders' rights. So for rights of Ukrainian defenders, the soldiers. So we had this. Now, this was dated back at the 30th of March, but Zelensky fires for advisors. Now, this is nothing new. We know Zelensky is really cleaning house this year of a lot of senior people, but dismissed Olena Verbetska from the post of advisor commissioner of the president of Ukraine on issues for Ukrainian defenders' rights. Now, I'm not saying this has anything to do with this, but what we have seen then today is that we have seen the conscription age signed off and dropped down from that 27 for 25, freeing up tens of thousands of men to potentially be conscripted and go and fight on the front lines. Now, we know that there is a troop shortage in Ukraine, and this is caused from a war, of course. You have high losses and you have high casualties as well, and a lot of people can't fight on the front line too, being medically exempt, and we'll talk about this as well, and people fleeing across borders too. What we need to mention too is Zelensky's official stance on how many troops have been killed is 31,000 so far in the war. So we'll look at this. My lawn is getting, well, it's not my lawn, my nature strip, the council is mowing it, so if you hear that, yeah, that's what's going on in the background. But this is from Kyiv Independent. Within new legal framework, Ukrainian men aged 18 to 25 can be conscripted for compulsory military service, while men aged 25 to 60 may be drafted to fight. So what we're talking about is, we know 18 to 60 people can't leave if you're a male, if you got that between your legs, but from 27 to 60, you could be conscripted. You could only be if you'd actually done military service 18 to that 27, but now that's dropped to 25. So only men who are over the age of compulsory military service, men aged 18 to 25, who had previous military experience, could be mobilized for the war effort. So you had to have served previously in that bracket to then be, but of course it's now dropped. The law decreased the maximum age for compulsory military service from 27, allowing men to be mobilised, younger men to be mobilised. The president also signed into force the creation of an online register for conscripts and cancelled the partially eligible status in the military medical examination. So we're going to talk about this online register. They just said this will make the administration of this far easier, but also it'll mean that you can then reach people who have then moved out of Ukraine, either now illegally or illegally, depending on these medical exemptions, eligibility, and age brackets as well, because what we know is this war has been going now for more than 2 years. So if this war started and you were 24, 25, well, now you've stepped into that bracket. Actually, no, I'm actually incorrect. This war started and you were late 22, early 23. Now it's 25, you've now stepped into this as well. And you may be around the world somewhere, but this partially eligible and eligible, the two categories, eligible and non-eligible. So you're not going to have eligible, partially, and non-eligible. It's just down to two. And the person who was previously examined partially eligible will now be re-examined. So if you've got an injury, if you've got whatever's going on, some level of disability potentially, and you are partially eligible, you're going to be re-examined and then potentially eligible now. So what this is doing is this is just freeing up more people to fight. We know the ammunition shortage, the air defense intercepting shortage, the air defense shortage as a whole, all of that can be fixed because it's artificially lowered or somewhat artificially from the West. The West is having a big problem making just enough rounds, but especially the air defense. Men to fight, this is something which is going to become more and more and more of a problem, and this is not something easy or quick to fix. This is going to be a growing issue, and this age, I think, throughout the wars, we're going to see years and years, will drop and drop and drop. Now, we need to talk about, this is actually just what came out. So this is from like the president's office from 27 to 25, just normal, you know, stuff come out. But this is what I wanted to speak about. Now, we've brought this up before. Now, I've cropped it off here, but this is Ukraine demographics of 2023. Now, we're going to exempt all on the right here because it is females. Those being conscripted are then males. Females, of course, can volunteer, but we're talking about men here. Now, you'll often hear the average age of a male fighter in Ukraine is 40 years old. Well, this shows why it is that. This is where the bulk of the men actually sit in this curve. Now, this arrow here that I've drawn in, this is around about 27. So you can see that this picks up between 27 and about 40. So this is where the bulk of those fighters are. And of course, beyond 40 to 60, you still have a lot of fighters sitting there. But dropping down to 25 along this line here, you can see that 25 to 27, there is a real lull in the amount of people actually sitting in here. And as well, you're going to have the same percentages of those who are ineligible for service as well. Now, like I spoke about a little bit earlier, you're going to have years and years of war and people stepping into age brackets where they can then fight. And I've put down here at about 18 that this starts lifting again. And of course, these age bracket down here, they can volunteer, or I believe in months or a year or more to come, people are talking in this war of 2026, 2027, more and more people are going to become of age to either volunteer or to fight. And you see down here, this line across here, I've said of long war at 15. Now, I know this may seem ridiculous, but these people here are now turning 16 this year because this is 2023, next year 17, and the year after 18, and potentially then they could volunteer, or depending on that, maybe then they will be conscripted if that age bracket then changes, or depending on their military service. So this is a problem though, is this big dip down here. In the Australian Infantry roles, the median age sat around 19. Of course, you've got older. Of course, you've got younger. We could deploy at 17. But this is where your meat of fighters normally sits. And this is a growing issue. And is, as you can see, the more you drop this, it's not going to solve it quickly, because you drop that age down to here. You've not that many people actually sitting in this bracket. This is a problem, potentially fixed of a very long war, depending if it goes years and years. But I just thought that was interesting. It is major news of that conscription being dropped, and that is evidence that there is a realistic shortage of men, and that's a growing issue, and there is a level of getting, you know, desperate of that amount of men. We talk about this, the amount of men in war, that matters, and that is very, very hard to fix. Not only do you need frontline, but you then need people well behind the line as well. And for every one combat soldier, you might have 4 to 8 to 10 people behind the line supporting too. So all hands on deck, but it's not going to be something that can be fixed quickly. Now, we need to talk about some of these very deep strikes into Russia. So Ukraine has used drones to penetrate some 11 to 1,300 kilometers into Russia's Tatarstan region and conduct then 2 strikes. So we're going to talk at length about this, as there is some, as always, misreporting in this. So this is the oil refinery that has been struck. Now, we don't know the exact damage on this. With everything with this, it's so hard to know, but just have a look at how deep in this is. So this is Moscow across here, and this is where then this strike took place. So you're talking minimum 1,100, probably more like 13 to 12, 13, 1,400 kilometer strike. So a very long strike in against then that oil refinery. And then this is where at least the Ukraine military intelligence, the GUR, said that they targeted a manufacturing facility for Shahed drones. Now, other accounts will deny this, and there's actually a lot of accounts now on the pro-Ukraine side or neutral side saying, no, it didn't strike the facility. It actually struck what was a dormitory of the Alabuga hostel and injured 7. No reports of deaths yet, and we will talk about that it most likely hit then the dormitory. But we'll talk about this, but have a look at where This is in location to the map as well. Incredible. Now, of course, this is going to be very wrong because I'm so zoomed out, but as well, incredible distance that has been traveled across here. Now, firstly, because it's easier, we'll talk about then the oil refinery, as we do know that this has been struck. Now, oil refineries, I don't know anything about oil refineries. I'm going to guess that most people don't. Now, how much damage is actually caused these? We don't know. We know that it will look like a lot because of everything burning. But what I've had friends of mine say who work actually in this industry, nothing to do with war, but they work in industry because Australia has a huge industry of bloody natural resource, has said that yes, it may look like a lot, but these are one of the most facilities in the world that absolutely have everything in place for fire and or explosion. That to actually damage a lot of this is difficult because it's purely built to try and reduce fire and explosion if something happens with fire control systems and measures. So we don't really know, but we know that these attacks on Russia's refineries, energy, oil, this is because the sanctions are not having the effect that they thought they would, and this is how Russia is continuing to fund this war. But with striking these, of course, supply and demand of oil can then increase Russia's cash reserves, at least in the short term. Long term, we'll have more of a problem. But here is then a photograph of the refinery, and damage here looks to be fairly minimal. It depends who you bloody speak to on this. And then we see some footage of what the drone was, or this firefighter here, or worker, the drone being removed from the refinery there. Not that much damage actually to the drone because it's probably such a long distance that weight is really going to matter, and probably doesn't have much, explosive ordnance on it that it may have, because of course you're going to have ordnance and fuel ratio for distance. But this is most likely, if we look from my footage, not my footage, but the footage I've got here, it's looking like this. Now, this is a Ukrainian UJ-22 domestically produced drone. This one has some mortars on the base of it, but likely that this is the same one. Could be wrong on that. Just, yeah, do your own research if you disagree with that. But where we more need to speak about is up here, and what is said to have been a strike against then where the Shahed drones are being built. Like I always say, anything in this war, every person in Ukraine, in Russia, has a smartphone. Every business or in a lot of homes have anything from a Ring camera to bloody cameras, and there's drones everywhere. If something happens, footage comes out regardless. And if there's a claim of something and then there's no footage within days, sorry, but that claim is likely bullshit. Now, let's have a look here, because footage came out straight away because it happened. So we can then see this is filming on. We can see this coming in here. Now, I just want to talk about this. What most likely this is a Ukrainian-built plane. This is, I've got the name of it here, an Aeropact A-22, and people saying that most likely this is what it is, with some level of autonomous system, then packed with explosives here. And I will get to this, but this is what they're saying, that the tail section, as well as where the front engine is, this is most likely this drone. Again, I pulled this off Twitter. I could be wrong exactly what it is, but this plane, there's even been people speculate that could have been flown by a person who is then bailed and autonomous systems taken over. That said, what we do know is it's gone a hell of a long way in. So then let's watch this footage, seeing it pass over these two buildings here, and then strike in the second, third of this building, causing then a major fiery explosion there. Now, what we need to look at is some of the damage here. So we have a first image of damage. So it hit like on the side of the building, has caused damage there. And then this one as well, which I believe is from the other angle here too. So it hasn't caused that much damage. It said that there has been 7 injured. They're saying that none have been killed. That said, reports like that are, official reports like that are always hard to sort of get your head around as well. But where did this actually then hit? Well, we're going to use this map as a bit of a reference, but the imagery of this map, this is from, I believe, 2022. So it is out of date, showing some of the dorms and some of the areas as well. But to give you an idea of where this area is here, we can see that this is a developmental area here. So I've got a map where I've just put some stuff on. So we see, no, sorry, wrong one. We see this building over here, that this here is a STEM building for science, technology, engineering, mathematics center, as well as more development areas around here. And it is said that the strike took place then around about this area where there are now dormitories that aren't shown on this map because it is from because the map is older compared to where it then is. Now, the best that I can find to actually line up where these dormitories and building is then these as well, of some geolocation guys on Twitter and on Telegram as well. And then this is the most, I guess, consistent that I can find. Now, what we'll see in the difference in the maps, let's have a look here, that this is where the geolocation is from multiple sources, saying that this is where then the explosion is. But you will see that these dorms here, they're saying dorms, haven't yet actually been built. Now, many are saying it's in these areas, but they're saying that it is here due to where the trees are. Now, 4 buildings at then the same distance. These number 4 buildings in the same distance. These aren't in the same distance across here. So it's not this location as was being then reported, that it is here on these buildings, and as well in line with images that have been taken place here as well. So difficult to know, but it does seem like, and everyone's sort of swinging that, it was actually the dorm that was struck. But most importantly in this is just how deep and how far these drones were able to travel into Russia and not be targeted. Now, the UJ-22, if it was that hit the refinery, that is a military-style drone. But the other plane that went through, I can see why that may seep through in areas where people, you know, air traffic control, people are just visualizing that. So that's just an airplane up in the air. This potentially is just, you know, some student pilot out for a flight. But it is interesting, and it is impressive of how far that those have actually made it across Russia here from Ukraine. Now, we need to have a look over some other little bits and pieces as well. Now, let's have a look at let's have a look at this footage here, because we have seen a new weapon used. So this footage has come out over the last 24 hours here in Thankyou in Avdiivka. I'll show you where this is. So this is a French missile known as an AASM, or more commonly known as the Hammer, a high-angle modular munition extended range. So bit of a mouthful, but like the name, you know, I do care about the naming of this. So this is in Thankyou, filmed from Russian forces, and we see it come in and then attack a building there. Now, these are about 250 kilograms. So you can see the agility of this as it's coming in, and then a direct strike on there. This guy gets away safely, but a very, very close call and very impressive footage. Now, we do know that these are being used because we have some footage of MiG-29s with these aboard from March. So we see then this MiG-29 here come over the top, one of the most beautiful airplanes ever made. And this is, of course, is a Ukrainian one. We see the bottom of this airplane here, and we also have some other images here showing then a Hammer on board here as well. So these are an impressive weapon system and an air-to-ground system. So these have been fired off an air asset that has hit. Now, one thing I do want to talk about, and I'm not trying to compare apples and oranges, but is the cost of a system like this, and where, how, and why things like the FAB will, I think, actually become more and more relevant in different militaries around the world when compared to what, I guess, is being developed. So this is just off Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. They say also that javelins are more expensive than they are, but the cost per weapon is about $300,000, or 12 times the cost of an American JDAM, whatever. With the budget, the cost is 164,000 euros, so there is a change in this as well, and they're looking to get them down to about 80,000 euros. Of course, this changes with just how many of them you're actually pumping out, as well as, they can go up and down with supply and demand as well for these. But these are still an expensive system, and this is where things like the FAB have actually been very, very cost effective and effective for Russia. And why I've spoken to some Air Force guys about, could we bring back something like this just for the amount of how much you can actually produce, and then the cost effectiveness of them. So the FAB's sitting about 2 million rubles, about 24,000 US. So they're saying 22,000 euros here. Now, of course, these numbers, we don't know how much these are actually worth with weapon systems. It can go up and down by a long way, but you can see you're talking about a quarter of the cost of them doing a very similar job. Of course, it's not going to be as fancy and dodging, But one thing we have seen in this war is quantity over quality with a lot of systems. Now, one thing we will talk at just right now is we will look at some fabs being dropped. So this is some fabs out here. Then you can see the glide wings pop out and they're off on their way. The impressive thing about this is that footage has actually then been geolocated. Now, it has been geolocated to down here between Rozkichty and Erdyank as well. So I have this zoomed in a map. So it's just about here. Let's see if we can actually get it. So right near sort of here, we zoom out, and this is sort of the area that we are looking at. Now, I'm going to get this significantly wrong, but we're talking about 40 kilometers behind the line. And you can see why those fabs are effective. They're a long way back. They're very cheap to make. You can make them in numerous amounts with lots of them on board the plane as well, and gliding in. And what we have seen, especially around Lake Huliapol, where we did see then fabs target this bridge here, that they are impressively accurate as well. We also saw another bit of footage just out from Madiinka where they did strike this train line across here. So they have increased the accuracy dramatically of them, and they are low cost, and the fabs, Russia has the amount of those, just the dumb bomb part of it, a hell of a lot. Now, let's then have a look at the maps I've been holding you off for too long. So, of course, here we have Ukraine and Kyiv in the center. Here we have the red areas, which have been occupied since 22, and the purple since 2014. Now, let's come into Avdiivka first. This is probably the area we have most to talk about, and somewhere that I didn't purposely not talk about it yesterday. I just completely missed it. So, of course, we have Semenivka, Badachi, Orlivka, Tonenki areas, which if you watch this or keep up with the war, you'll be very, very familiar with currently. So, this is what I missed yesterday. Now, if we look, then this is Semenivka. Up here, we see there was, according to a Ukrainian source, a very Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian source, there was a crossing by the Russian forces, and there is a developed area across the Drina River here that the Russians have got. That is important because this is where the river here is the natural barrier for Ukraine's first line of defense. And it says there has been a crossing there. That is very interesting to then look at, and this map here is not showing us that. So let's have a look actually at what has changed then on this map over the past 2 days, because we do know we didn't get April 2nd, but we did get a 1st and a 3rd. So we're back on the 1st, and then we skip through to the 3rd, and what we can see is an expansion of control around Pervomayski, and this is a large expansion of control. Now, one thing we do need to note is up here, these houses here, these are part of Verdani, not Pervomayski. That Verdani, the town, comes all the way out here. But there is advancement across. Now, the Russians have captured then this bridge between Verdani and Pervomayski, and have captured then this area heading further west. So there is a large change in ground there, especially if we go back a couple of days. We can see from the 29th and then through on how that is now looking. Now, let's have a look then on the Surak map and see what is being said here. Now, this doesn't talk about this Pervomayski, but it does talk more about this Umansk-Tonenki area, of which we showed you just before. So what you can see is this is Umansk right here. This is Tonenki, and this is where this waterway runs through here. Now, what is interesting, and this map hasn't shown this, is that the Russian tanks were destroyed in about this location here, so a fair way in. What we do know is that attack got hit very, very hard and had a lot of losses. What we don't know is, well, was it still, you can have losses and still have an successful attack if you then have captured an area in here. That is what we don't know, but Surak is showing that there is a lot more control in here than this map is showing out from Tonenki. So west of Avdiivka, this area just in here, you can see where these two paddocks line up here. Russian army took control over the southern shore of the Drina River, southwest of Tonenki, reaching positions less than a kilometer from Umansk. So, of course, Umansk here. Moreover, Russian troops are clearing the last houses of Orlivka in the opposite side of the river, so clearing across the Drina here. The situation in Badachi is contradictory. What could be confirmed that Russian troops were able to establish themselves on the other side of the river, like we'd speaking about. However, they do not seem to have reached the western end of the town. On the other hand, it could be confirmed that Russian forces failed in their attempt to consolidate north of the village. So we don't really know what is going up here. so we're talking Badachi here, that has there been a successful crossing or not down down in the south part here. But we're not really sure exactly what's happening here. More will come out. Eventually, we will know exactly what is actually happening here. Now, we had NOAA reports map from yesterday. We'll get NOAA reports map from today. Now, this is showing way more similarly to than what Suryak was showing, more so, if I can bring Suryak's back up, more so than what then the Deep State MOD map is showing. So we can see Urmansk, the river and the reservoir is showing very closely than here. And I might use these map more often as well. Now, I have nothing for Bakhmut on any other maps, but we do have a map update on this map. It's been a couple of days. So let's roll back. And then we see this expansion of control out from Ivanovsky here as well, with probably about 70% of it coming under Russian control, but all of it now being in grey zone. One thing I do want to have a look at on then this map is around Ivanovsky, where this control is and where is going to be some problems for the Russian forces. So the Russians have more advantage when it is open terrain or urban terrain due to the use of FABs, artillery overmatch, and manpower overmatch. Where we see them struggle is in heavily forested areas such as Kremena, where we know there's a lot of problems in for Russian advantage, up in Kremena, that this barely moves up here. And when we come down into Ivanovsky, previously to this, where's my Google Earth? It has been urban or open terrain, but they're about to head into more heavily forested areas where we may see this advance on the south here, heading west, really slow down as it enters here, because there is closed terrain, built up forested areas, as well as the hilly areas here. So things like ambush will be very, very effective here, and things like your FABs and artillery armoured overmatch will be less effective. I'm not saying not effective, it will be less effective, but we had to have open terrain in between then Ivanovsky and Kromove. We do have this straight into Chasiv Yar that could get cut off as well. So we're not sure what the overall mission is actually going to look like in this area. Are the Russians going to try and push straight down the middle here, or try and push through these forest lines? History tells the forest lines probably aren't the best move for the Russians, maybe out from Ivanovsky on the axis they're pushing here as well. That said, I'm not a general, not a colonel, I'm a bloody private, and we don't know yet how that will look, but this will become more and more of an issue. Now, just up then to the north, the Deep State map doesn't show any difference here, but said to be some change in around Bilorivka. This area changes little bit by little bit all the time. So we saw you just down. It's very, very hard to see the yellow, but just here, this sort of spire out here, but we don't really know. During the last hours, Russian army managed to capture a series of positions south of the Bilorivka chalk quarry. We know this changes a hell of a lot, same as in Kremena, just tiny little movements back and forward between just like literally just positional movement. Now, we are going to head down into Novomyalivka here, see what has changed. We know there has been a vast change in here over the past couple of weeks. If I can bring that up. Yep, there we go. And then there has been some change on the south, but only from last time. This to now, just a grey zone expansion, but that grey zone taking over more than 80% of Novomyalivka. And then NOAA reports had then this map update here today. So we can see where this crossing is out here as well, that heads into this road to the north of the reservoir, said that this area has now closed up as well. So from the NOAA reports map compared to then the Deep State whatever map you want to call it, MOD, it's saying that it is more than looking like, whoop, what have I done? Oh no, that it's looking, sorry, I was drawing up some lines, that it's looking more so like this. So again, very difficult to know exactly what is happening in here. Now we'll head, there's no other changes except for down at Robotny. This is where the maps are saying just a completely different story. But one thing we do see is just a reduction in Ukrainian control here, an increase in then grey zone. Then this is the same location that Suryak is saying that Russia has had a lot of advancement. So in here, we're not 100% sure yet what it's actually looking like in there currently. Now, we will have a look at then Warmapper's net change that has come out at the beginning of this month. So for March 24th, said that there's 0.01% change on or gain of land. Now, this takes into account the full amount of Ukraine, not just changes. So you can see where the Ukrainian offensive was, where the Russian offensive has started. We don't know if the full offensive has actually started yet. Of course, Feb, this is talking about Avdiivka. And of course, you're looking in here areas like Robotny, Urozhany, areas like this. Now, we'll have a look at this one. This is over the whole map. Now, this is where Kherson, Kharkiv took place at the end of 22. And since then, this war has really been a war of attrition, has been stagnant since then. You're not allowed to use those words, but it has been. That this is just very, you're talking 0.01% changes month to month to month, now well over a year. Hard to make a case that that isn't then how this war has. Now, this is interesting. This is a waterfall graph here. So you can see when Russia invaded, you can see the amount of Russian gains and the areas that Ukraine has then captured back over time. Now, of course, this is where things like Kyiv took place. And then this is the end of 22 offensive. But since then as well, very, very little changes shown across the maps or anywhere on then the front line. Speaking of this, we'll then talk about the Ukrainian government allocating more funds for build up fortification. So $144 million to fortify Donetsk, Kherson, Zap, Mykolaiv, and Sumy. We know this is huge panic. I'll use the word panic to pump into these areas and build up defenses, because we know that there may be Russian offensives, and we know that likely Ukraine's not going to go on the offensive this year, and they have ammo issues, manpower issues, which sitting in defense, you use significantly less of that. So it's a good idea to build up those defenses. But somewhere like Avdiivka, we saw it fall 20 kilometers very quickly due to lack of defenses. And like in this, it says, face criticism for slow progress. Exactly, have seen that. Many people, dating back 2022, have gone, we should be building this now. If we don't need it, great. But if we do need it, well, you can't start building it when you then need it. A working group was established only in November to coordinate fortification efforts. This should have been done way earlier than that. Just my 2 cents. But Zelensky has said the task is massive, but the pace is good. Now, Zelensky with CBS News has spoken about a major Russian offensive come at the end of May or in June. So still maybe a month or more away that there could be a major Russian push. And of course, this push is going to take advantage of Ukraine's AD, their air defense, their ammo shortages, and their manpower shortages. If you're going to do it, it's probably the time to do it now, because those aren't going to be fixed in a number of weeks. Now, we know Russia has similar issues. We know they've got some manpower issues. We know they've definitely got air defense issues. We've seen 1,200-kilometer bloody drones going in. But manpower has seemingly been fixed a bit with the training. It doesn't seem like there's the amount of armor shortage that there once was, and the artillery ammo has seemingly been fixed, especially with then the use of FABs to give some relief to the guns in the front line, and North Korea also supplying in as well. Now, we're just going to talk over the Ministry of Defense update, as I thought this was something interesting to look at here. But is likely the result of continued successful Ukrainian strikes on military locations. Russia has been forced to implement a number of decoy and deception techniques in order to obfuscate Ukrainian targeting efforts. At this airfield in Crimea, there are decoy Russian fighter jets painted on the concrete. So then they give us this image here. So we see a Su-30 fighter jet that's painted down and then a chopper on top. However, Russian helicopters still regularly land on the painted decoy fighter silhouettes, completely undermining the deception attempt. No, this also reveals a true order of battle of aircraft strength in these air bases, which Russia is likely trying to mask from Ukraine's intelligence picture. I disagree with this. I don't think it's for that at all. What I think these are painted for is AI targeting on board drones and or whatever else is going in. That it's using imagery on board the drone to target. This is like, say, somewhat how a javelin works with optical thermal as well. But I think it's actually to deceive that. You and I would go, oh, we know that's bullshit, but that's actually what it's trying to deceive. And I don't think that it is completely useless if it's doing that. I could see that is working or could work. Sorry, I don't say it's working. I say it could work. And I think this is this very, very same thing we saw within the tires on the aeroplanes. It's changing thermal signature. People go, oh, it makes the thermal signature bigger. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it makes it bigger or bigger or smaller. What matters is it's changed, and what the parameters of what that drone may be looking for, it doesn't fit and may not strike it, as well as the painting of these on the airfield as well may change that AI optical targeting, thermal targeting as well. That's just my 2 cents. That's how I see it. I've spoken to some guys who are very knowledgeable who work in that space, and they've said very similar. As well, you know, satellite imagery and whatever can make it more difficult as well. But that's just my 2 cents on that. I see that it actually could be effective. They're saying it's not. I don't know. Either way. Legends, I stuffed up part of this and I might have to chop and change some bits in, but if it does run smooth, great. Thank you for all your support. There's links down below if you'd like to continue supporting me. But otherwise, look after yourselves and I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.